Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work as a data analyst, which means I spend most of my day hunched over spreadsheets and databases. The building's old but well maintained with thick walls that usually keep noise to a minimum. At least that's what I thought until he moved in next door. 3 months ago, I was living peacefully. I'd come home from work, make dinner, watch some shows, and go to bed at a reasonable hour. My biggest worry was whether I'd remembered to meal prep for the week. Life was simple and quiet, exactly how I liked it. Then the new tenant moved into apartment 4B. From day one, this guy was a walking stereotype. Picture this: tank tops in the middle of winter when it's snowing outside, backwards baseball cap that he apparently never removes even indoors, and a different woman every few nights. He must have had some kind of subscription service for dates because the rotation was incredible. At first, I figured maybe he was just settling in, showing friends around the new place. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. This man turned his apartment into what I can only describe as a performance venue. Every single night he brought someone home, the entire building got a free audio experience none of us asked for. The headboard would slam against our shared wall like he was trying to break through to my side. The mattress squeaked in a rhythm that could probably be used as a metronome. But the worst part was the theatrical moaning and his commentary. This guy would yell things like he was narrating an adult movie for a live studio audience. The first few times I tried to be understanding. Maybe he didn't realize how thin the walls were. Maybe he'd figure it out on his own and tone it down. But after 2 weeks of losing sleep every other night, I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own. I knocked on his door one evening around 7 p.m. before his usual entertainment began. He answered wearing his signature tank top and backwards cap combo, looking annoyed that I'd interrupted whatever he was preparing for. I introduced myself as his neighbor from apartment 4A and told him I wanted to talk about something. He asked what was up, sounding impatient. I explained that the walls were pretty thin between our apartments and asked if he could maybe keep it down during his late-night activities because I had to get up early for work. He looked me up and down with this smirk that made my skin crawl, then leaned against his door frame like he was posing for a magazine. He asked if I was jealous and said he could make room if I wanted to join sometime. I stood there for a moment, processing what he'd just said. This guy actually thought I was complaining because I was envious of his lifestyle, not because he was being inconsiderate to everyone in the building. I told him no thanks and that I just needed to sleep at night. He said it wasn't his problem and suggested I invest in some earplugs. Then he shut the door in my face. That night, he was louder than ever. He was doing it on purpose. The headboard banging was so intense I thought he might actually break through the wall. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to this circus next door, and that's when I decided enough was enough. The next morning I went to work and spent my lunch break researching. I found a template for official building notices online and got creative. I made a fake notice that looked completely legitimate, with proper formatting and everything. It read, "Notice: this unit is under pest control monitoring for possible bedbug activity. Visitors advised not to sit on furniture or bedding until further notice. Property management." I printed it on official-looking paper, laminated it for that authentic touch, and waited for the perfect moment. Friday evening rolled around and sure enough, I heard him coming up the stairs with female laughter echoing behind him. I waited about 10 minutes, then quietly slipped out and taped my masterpiece right on his door where nobody could miss it. About 20 minutes later, I heard voices in the hallway. The woman asked what the notice was about and sounded alarmed when she read about bed bugs. He tried to dismiss it, saying it was nothing and probably just someone pranking him. He told her to ignore it. She asked if he was serious and said she wasn't risking bed bugs for anyone because that was disgusting. He kept insisting it was fake and asked if he looked like someone who'd have bed bugs. She said no and that she was out. I heard her heels clicking rapidly down the stairs while he called after her. Then his door slammed so hard my wall shook. Finally, some peace and quiet. But my victory was short-lived. A few nights later, the show started up again with a new performer. This guy clearly hadn't learned anything from the bedbug incident. If anything, he seemed more determined to prove his prowess to the entire building. That's when I called in reinforcements. My friend from college has always been dramatic. She did theater in school and could probably convince you the sky was purple if she put her mind to it. When I explained my situation, she was immediately on board. She said this sounded like the perfect role for her and told me to let her handle it. We planned it for the following weekend. Saturday night came and right on schedule, he brought another date home. We waited about 15 minutes for them to get settled, then my friend walked up to his door and started pounding on it like the building was on fire. The door opened and he stood there looking confused in his usual tank top uniform. My friend started screaming at him, asking if he was serious. He asked who she was, clearly bewildered by this random woman yelling at him. She accused him of not telling her he had HIV and said she just got her test results back and was positive. She screamed that he had ruined her life. She pushed past him into the apartment, crying and carrying on like her world had just ended. The performance was Oscar-worthy. I could hear the girl inside asking what was happening, then suddenly there was scrambling and the sound of someone getting dressed very quickly. The girl appeared in the doorway, grabbed her jacket, and literally ran down the hallway. She didn't even wait for the elevator, just hit the stairs at full speed. Several neighbors had come out to see what the commotion was about. I may have mentioned to a few of them earlier that there might be some entertainment in the hallway that evening. My friend kept up her performance for another minute, then stormed out, still sobbing dramatically. One of the neighbors actually started slow clapping. Another one just shook his head and said one word about how awkward the whole situation was. The guy stood in his doorway looking like someone had just told him Christmas was cancelled. He kept looking around at all the neighbors, trying to figure out what had just happened. The confusion on his face was absolutely priceless. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, it's been completely quiet next door. No headboard symphony, no mattress percussion, no theatrical commentary. The building feels peaceful again, like everyone can finally breathe normally. I sleep through the night now. My productivity at work has improved, and I actually enjoy being home again instead of dreading the evening entertainment. I graduated college with a business degree and exactly 0 job prospects. My savings account had about enough money to buy a decent pizza, so when my best friend from middle school offered to split rent on an apartment, I jumped at the chance. We'd been friends for years, but living together was going to be interesting since we're complete opposites. He got a job at some tech startup right after graduation, the kind of place with ping pong tables and free kombucha. Meanwhile, I was still sending out resumes and working part-time at a coffee shop. The apartment was nice though, and we each got our own room, which seemed perfect at first. The problem started about a week after I moved in. My roommate has this thing about organization that borders on obsessive. His closet looks like a department store display. Every shirt is organized by color, then by sleeve length. His socks are folded into perfect little cubes and arranged in rows. Even his books are organized by height and genre. His room looks like something out of a home improvement magazine. My room, on the other hand, is what I call lived in. Clothes on the chair, books stacked on the floor, papers scattered on my desk. It works for me. I know where everything is and it feels comfortable and relaxed. But he hated it. Every time he walked past my open door, I could see him physically cringe. At first, he tried to be subtle about it. He started leaving articles about organization on the kitchen counter and making casual comments about how much better he slept in his perfectly arranged room. He'd mentioned studies he'd read about clean spaces leading to better sleep and productivity. When I didn't take the hint, he got more direct. He started suggesting that maybe I could try organizing my room a bit, just to see how it felt. I politely declined each time, but he wouldn't drop it. This went on for weeks. The hints got less and less subtle. He'd stand in my doorway and point out how much better his room looked, how much more peaceful it was, how I should really consider making some changes. He even offered to help me reorganize my space, insisting that I should copy his setup exactly because it worked so well for him. I kept saying no, but he wouldn't let it go. He'd go on about how much more productive and focused I'd be if I just trusted him and arranged my room exactly like his. It was starting to get really annoying. Finally, after about a month of this constant nagging, I decided to give him what he wanted. Sort of. I told him he was right and that I should organize my room like his. He got excited and offered to help me move things around that weekend, but I said I wanted to do it myself as a personal project. That weekend, while he was out visiting his parents, I went to work. But I didn't just organize my room like his, I made it identical. And I mean identical. Same lamp in the same spot, same color blanket folded the same way, same books arranged in the same order on identical shelves. I even found the same motivational wall quote he had hanging above his desk and printed it out, making sure to hang it at the exact same crooked angle his was at. It took me most of the weekend, but when I was done, walking from his room to mine was like looking at the same space twice. It was weirdly satisfying, like completing some kind of bizarre puzzle. When he got back Sunday night, I was in the kitchen making dinner. I casually mentioned that he should check out my room because I'd taken his advice. He walked down the hall, and I heard his footsteps stop, then silence. After a long minute, he came back to the kitchen and said it looked good, but his voice was weird and uncertain. He didn't say much else that night, and I could tell he was processing what he'd seen. I think at first he was flattered that I'd copied his style so completely, but then things started getting weird. I began syncing my routine to his. When he got up at 6:30 for his morning run, so did I. When he made his protein smoothie for breakfast, I made the exact same one. When he went grocery shopping on Saturday mornings, I tagged along and bought the same brands he did. Nothing too dramatic, but enough to be noticeable. His body language changed completely. He started giving me these sideways looks, like he was wondering how far I was going to take this whole thing. The confident guy who'd been lecturing me about organization for weeks suddenly seemed nervous. The final touch came when I noticed he'd bought new running shoes. They were expensive, some limited edition brand I'd never heard of. My old shoes were perfectly fine, but something told me these would complete the picture. I ordered the same pair online and wore them to our usual coffee shop the next morning. When he noticed them, he asked if I bought the same shoes as him. I told him yeah, and that he had great taste, so I figured if he'd researched them, they must be good. That night, he kept his bedroom door shut for the first time since we'd moved in together. A few days later, I noticed he'd started rearranging his room, moving furniture around and changing the layout. I didn't follow suit this time. I'd made my point. The copying experiment lasted about 2 weeks total, but the effects went on much longer. We stayed friends, and he never brought up my room organization again. In fact, he stopped commenting on my space entirely, even when I let it return to its natural, comfortable messiness. About a year later, something funny happened. He changed his room layout again, completely rearranging everything. New bed position, different shelf placement, the works. I didn't think much of it until I caught him watching me walk past his open door like he was waiting to see if I'd start copying his new setup. The paranoia was hilarious. Here was this guy who'd spent weeks trying to get me to copy him, and now he was terrified I might actually do it again. So one morning, while we were both in the kitchen having coffee, I decided to mess with him a little. I casually mentioned that his new room setup looked nice and asked if I should be taking notes. He laughed, but there was definitely nervousness in his voice. He asked if I was going to do that whole copying thing again, and I could tell the question was serious, despite his attempt to sound casual. After that conversation, he started keeping his door closed more often, especially when he was rearranging things or adding new items to his room. Meanwhile, my room stayed exactly the same as it always was, a comfortable lived-in mess that worked perfectly for me. Every now and then, I'd catch him looking at my room when he walked by, like he was checking to make sure I hadn't started copying him again. I never had to say anything else about it. Just that one casual comment in the kitchen was enough to keep him on edge. The guy who'd been so confident about his perfect organizational system, who'd spent weeks trying to convince me to copy his setup exactly, was now genuinely worried that I might actually do it again. The irony was perfect. He'd gotten exactly what he asked for, and it had made him completely paranoid about his own space. I moved to this small town 3 years ago with my daughter after my divorce. As a single mom working 2 jobs, I was barely keeping us afloat financially. My ex-husband had disappeared after the divorce, leaving us with nothing but debt. I'm originally from Korea, and my daughter is mixed race. She looks more Asian than white, which unfortunately makes her a target sometimes. Our Saturday lunch tradition at this Korean restaurant downtown was the one bright spot in our week. The owner was this sweet elderly man who reminded me of my grandfather back in Seoul. His food was authentic and reasonably priced, and he always made my daughter feel welcome. She'd been learning Korean from me since she was little, and he loved practicing with her. Last Saturday started like any other. My daughter and I walked into the restaurant around 12 p.m. The place was busier than usual, was about half the tables full. We took our usual spot by the window and started looking at the menu, even though we pretty much knew it by heart. My daughter was excited because she'd been practicing a new Korean phrase all week. When the owner came over to take our order, she proudly said her greeting in Korean. He beamed and responded back in Korean, praising her pronunciation. That's when Karen decided to make her grand entrance. This woman at the table behind us suddenly turned around and glared at us. She was probably in her 50s with that haircut that screams entitlement. You know the one. Karen loudly announced that this was America and we needed to speak English here. I was caught off guard. My daughter looked confused and a little scared. I asked her politely if there was a problem. She said there absolutely was a problem. She complained that people like us come here and refuse to speak the language, calling it disrespectful. The restaurant went quiet. Everyone was staring now. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and anger. I tried to explain that we were just ordering food, and my daughter was practicing Korean with the owner. Karen said she didn't care what language it was. She told us we were in America now and needed to speak English or go back where we came from. The owner tried to defuse the situation. He politely told Karen there was no problem and that we were good customers. Karen snapped back that he shouldn't tell her what the problem was. She said he probably didn't speak English properly either. That's when she really crossed the line. She stood up and walked over to our table. She started lecturing me about raising my kid to be un-American. She said my daughter needed to learn proper English instead of what she called gibberish. My daughter, who's only 8 years old, started tearing up. She's dealt with bullies at school before, but never an adult acting like this. She asked me what she had done wrong, her voice small and scared. That broke my heart. Before I could respond, Karen reached over and slapped my daughter across the face. She said maybe that would teach her to speak English. The entire restaurant gasped. My daughter started crying, holding her cheek. I saw red. I was about to lose it completely when the manager appeared out of nowhere. The manager was this tough-looking woman in her 40s. She'd been watching from behind the counter, and Karen messing with a child was apparently her breaking point. The manager demanded to know if Karen had just hit that child. Karen said my daughter needed to learn some manners. She claimed that people like us needed to respect American culture. The manager told Karen she needed to leave immediately. Karen refused, saying she wasn't going anywhere until she got an apology. She ranted about how this was exactly what was wrong with this country. The manager didn't say another word. She walked right up to Karen and slapped her across the face, harder than Karen had hit my daughter. She told Karen there was her lesson in American culture, explaining that we don't hit children here. Karen stumbled backward, holding her face in shock. She screamed that the manager couldn't hit her and threatened to call the police. The manager told her to go ahead and call them. She said she'd be sure to tell the officers how Karen had assaulted an 8-year-old girl. Karen fumbled for her phone, screaming about lawsuits and assault charges. She was making such a scene that other customers were recording her with their phones. Karen called the police. 2 officers showed up about 10 minutes later. By then, several customers had volunteered to be witnesses, and someone had already uploaded the video to social media. The first officer talked to Karen, who was still ranting about being assaulted. The second officer came over to us. He was gentle with my daughter, asking if she was okay and if her face hurt. The officer asked me to explain what had happened. I told him everything, and several other customers backed up my story. The owner provided his security camera footage, which caught the whole thing. When the officers reviewed the footage and talked to witnesses, Karen's attitude changed real quick. She went from demanding everyone be arrested to trying to claim it was all a misunderstanding. She said she was just trying to help my child learn English and that she had barely touched her. The officer told Karen she was under arrest for assault of a minor. She screamed that it was ridiculous and that my daughter wasn't even a real American. That comment definitely didn't help her case. When they put her in handcuffs, she kept screaming about how unfair everything was and how she was the real victim. The manager refused to press charges for being slapped, saying Karen got what she deserved. But the district attorney decided to prosecute the child assault case anyway, especially after the video went viral online. 3 months later, Karen was sentenced to community service, anger management classes, and had to pay for my daughter's therapy sessions. She also got banned from the restaurant and several other businesses in town after her racist rant made the local news. The community rallied around the restaurant. Business doubled after people heard what happened. The owner was able to hire more staff and expand his menu. My daughter still practices her Korean every week when we go for lunch. She's not scared anymore, and the other customers always smile when they hear her chatting with the owner. The manager usually comes over to check on us too, and my daughter calls her hero lady. I'm a 23-year-old college student working my way through a specialized program with only 8 people in my class. We all know each other pretty well by now, which makes what happened even more frustrating. I work night shifts at a warehouse to pay for school. It's exhausting, but I need the money. I usually get home around 6 in the morning, sleep until noon, then study until I have to leave for work again. It's not ideal, but I've made it work for 3 years now. When thesis time came around, we were assigned partners. I got paired with a classmate I'd worked with on several projects before. She's a single mom with a 5-year-old daughter and also works nights as a security guard. I respected that she had a lot on her plate, so when she occasionally turned things in late or needed extensions, I tried to be understanding. But this thesis was different. This was our final project, the thing that would determine whether we graduated or not. The first red flag came during our initial planning meeting. We met at the campus library on a Saturday morning. I suggested we start conducting interviews for our research right away and told her I could do mine the following week. She agreed that it sounded good and said she'd try to get hers done soon too. When I asked when she thought she'd have time and suggested we coordinate our schedules, she said she'd let me know but mentioned that things were really crazy with her daughter and work. 3 weeks passed. She hadn't done a single interview. I had already completed mine and was ready to move on to the next phase. I asked her how those interviews were coming along. She told me she was working on it, but said it had been really hard to find time. I told her I understood but explained that we were starting to fall behind since our advisor was expecting an update the following week. She acknowledged this and promised she'd get them done. Another month went by. Still nothing. I ended up conducting her interviews myself just so we wouldn't fail the project entirely. Each interview was about an hour long, and I had to find people willing to participate on short notice. When it came time to transcribe everything, we agreed to split the work evenly. I took 3 interviews, she took 3. 2 weeks later, I had finished my transcriptions. Hers were nowhere to be found. I asked if she had finished transcribing her interviews. She said she'd been meaning to get to that and asked if I could give her a few more days. I reminded her that we were supposed to submit everything the next day. She pleaded for just a few more days. I stayed up all night transcribing her interviews too. My eyes were burning from staring at the computer screen, but I didn't have a choice. The worst part came during the encoding phase. This is where you go through all your data and categorize it for analysis. It's the most time-consuming and tedious part of the entire project. We're talking about weeks of careful, detailed work. We split it 50-50 again. I immediately started working on my portion, putting in 3 to 4 hours every day after class. I asked how her encoding was going. She said it was going good and that she was making progress. A week later, I checked in again. I asked if she could send me what she'd done so far because I wanted to make sure we were on the same track. She said she was still working on it and would send it soon. This went on for almost a month. Every few days I'd message her asking for updates. Every time she'd give me some variation of how she was almost done or just needed a few more days. Meanwhile, I could see her posting on social media constantly. Pictures of nights out with friends, stories about binge-watching shows, updates about her weekend plans. She was clearly active and had free time, she just wasn't using it for our project. Finally, I gave up and did her portion myself. I was furious, but I was more afraid of failing than I was angry at her. When our advisor found out what happened during our next meeting, they were not happy. Our advisor said this was unacceptable and that academic partnerships required equal contribution from both parties. She apologized and said she just had a lot going on. Our advisor told her she'd be responsible for paying for the software subscription we needed for analysis. It was a small victory, but it was literally the only thing she contributed to the entire project. I decided to give her one more chance. I asked her to handle our thesis defense presentation and write the script for our oral presentation. She agreed and said she could definitely do that, mentioning that she was good at presentations. The defense was scheduled for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I showed up early to set up and review our materials one last time. 10 o'clock came and went. No sign of her. 10:30. Still nothing. At 11:15, I was standing in front of our three-person committee trying to explain where my partner was. One of the committee members asked if we should reschedule. I told them I could present what we had since I knew the material well enough. I opened our presentation file and my heart sank. It was a complete mess. Slides were missing information. The formatting was inconsistent, and several sections were just placeholder text that said add content here. I spent the next 20 minutes frantically trying to fix what I could while the committee waited. It was humiliating. She finally showed up at 11:30, an hour and a half late. She apologized repeatedly and explained that her daughter had a thing at school, and then traffic was crazy. The script she handed me covered maybe 20 pages of our 45-slide presentation. I had to improvise the rest on the spot. Somehow we managed to get through it, but the committee wasn't impressed. They told us we needed to redo major portions of our work and resubmit. That's when I reached my breaking point. After the defense, we were supposed to work separately on rewriting 2 key chapters, then compare and combine our work. I started immediately working every spare moment I had. She didn't even begin. For 2 weeks, I sent her messages every other day. I'd ask how the rewrite was going, and she'd say she was starting it that weekend for sure. I'd ask for updates on her chapters, and she'd claim she was making some progress and should have something soon. When I reminded her that the deadline was approaching and asked her to send me what she had, she'd say she was almost done and just needed to polish it up. I was watching her post Instagram stories about going to concerts and having dinner with friends while telling me she was too busy to work on our project. Finally, I'd had enough. I scheduled a meeting with our advisor. I told them I wanted to submit the thesis under my name only. Our advisor said that was a serious decision and asked if I understood that it meant she wouldn't graduate. I said I understood but explained that I'd done 95% of the work myself and that she hadn't contributed anything meaningful to the project. Our advisor said they'd review the documentation they had and get back to me. Word got out somehow. Maybe she found out from the advisor, or maybe one of our classmates overheard something. Either way, suddenly, everyone had an opinion. One classmate asked if I didn't think I was being a little harsh, pointing out that she was a single mom. I replied that being a single mom didn't excuse not doing any work for 3 months. Another classmate told me to come on and just help her out one more time, saying we were so close to finishing. I explained that I'd been helping her out the entire time and had literally done her work for her. The same classmate argued that if I submitted alone, she wouldn't graduate, and that was her future I was messing with. I asked what about my future and all the work I put in. The pressure was intense. Everyone kept telling me I was being too harsh, that I should just carry her through one more time. But I was exhausted. I'd spent months doing double the work while she did nothing. 2 days before the final deadline, she finally reached out to me directly. She acknowledged that she knew she'd been behind on things, but asked if we couldn't just submit together, saying she really needed to graduate. I asked where her rewrite was and where her updated encoding was. She promised she could get it done that night if I needed it. I told her she'd been saying that for weeks and that I didn't believe her anymore. She begged me and said she'd make it up to me somehow. I asked how, pointing out that she'd had multiple chances to contribute and had chosen not to, so why would this time be different? She didn't have an answer for that. I submitted the thesis under my name only. A week later, our advisor called me into their office. They told me they'd reviewed everything and agreed with my decision. They said the work quality was consistently mine throughout, and the documentation showed minimal contribution from my partner. I asked if I could graduate. They said yes and told me they wanted me to know that this was the right call, explaining that academic integrity mattered and I shouldn't have to carry someone who wasn't willing to do the work. My classmates were less supportive. Some of them stopped talking to me entirely. They thought I was cruel for preventing her from graduating. But here's what they didn't know. 3 days after the deadline, she still hadn't turned in her individual rewrite. Even when faced with not graduating, she still chose not to do the work. I graduated with honors. She didn't graduate at all. 6 months later, I ran into one of our former classmates at a coffee shop. They told me they'd heard she never ended up going back to finish her degree. When I asked if that was really true, they confirmed it and said she'd mentioned that college just wasn't for her after all. I'm a single mom working 2 jobs to make ends meet. My son just turned 6 and honestly, money has been tight lately. I've been picking up extra shifts at the restaurant where I work evenings, plus my day job at the insurance office. Between rent, groceries, and all the other bills, there's not much left over for fun stuff. But my kid's birthday only comes once a year, and I wanted to make it special for him. I've been saving up for months, literally putting away $20 or $30 whenever I could spare it. My son had been begging for a party at the trampoline park ever since his friend had one there a few months ago. The place isn't cheap, but I finally had enough saved up to book their party package. It included the private room for 2 hours, pizza, drinks, and party bags for 12 kids. That was my limit, 12 kids, which meant I could invite his whole class and it would work out perfectly with my budget. I sent out invitations 3 weeks ahead of time to make sure all the parents could plan for it. I even included my phone number and asked them to confirm if their kid could come so I could get an accurate count. Everything was planned down to the last detail because I couldn't afford any surprises. The day of the party, I was actually feeling pretty good about myself. My son was beyond excited, and seeing him happy made all those extra shifts worth it. We got to the trampoline park early to set up the private room with decorations I'd bought on sale. The staff was great and helped me get everything ready. Kids started arriving right on time and everything was going perfectly. The birthday boy was having a blast with his friends, jumping around and laughing. I was taking pictures and chatting with some of the other parents who stayed. About an hour in, I noticed there was an extra kid in the group that I didn't recognize. At first, I thought maybe he was a sibling of one of the invited kids, but when I looked around, I saw this woman I'd never seen before standing near the party room entrance. She was just watching the kids like she belonged there. Something felt off about the whole situation. I walked over to her and tried to be polite about it. I asked if she was with one of the kids we had invited today. She told me no, but her son went to the same school and had seen the party bags when I was walking in. She said he deserved to be included too. I was honestly speechless for a second. This woman had just admitted that she and her kid crashed my son's private party, and she was acting like it was completely normal. I apologized, but explained that this was a private party with a specific guest list, and we didn't have any extras. She rolled her eyes at me like I was being completely unreasonable. She asked me if I couldn't just let one more child in and wanted to know what kind of person makes a kid watch a party from the sidelines. Now I was getting annoyed. This lady had some serious nerve. I told her I was the kind of person who respects budgets and boundaries, and that this party was already paid for based on a specific number of kids. She brushed off my concerns and said it was just one more kid, asking how much it could possibly cost. I explained that it wasn't just about the cost, though that was part of it. It was about the fact that this was my son's party and she wasn't invited. She was getting more aggressive now, and I could see some of the other parents starting to notice the commotion. She called me ridiculous and said kids should be inclusive. She claimed her son had every right to be there. I told her that her son had the right to be there when she paid for her own party, because this wasn't a public event. She said she couldn't believe how selfish I was being, and that it was just a children's party. I reminded her that it was my child's party that I had saved up for months to afford. I suggested that if she wanted her son to have a trampoline park party, she could book her own. That's when she really lost it. She started raising her voice. She went on about how this was exactly what was wrong with parents today, claiming we had no sense of community and no consideration for other children. I shot back that the only thing wrong was her thinking she could crash someone else's private party and then get mad when told to leave. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of me. She announced that this was going on Facebook and that she was going to let everyone know how horrible I was. She asked if I was proud of myself. I told her that, actually, I was proud of myself. I explained that I was proud I had worked extra shifts for months to give my son a nice birthday party, proud that I stuck to my boundaries, and proud that I was teaching my son that you can't just take whatever you want. By now, the trampoline park staff had noticed the argument and came over. When I explained the situation, they immediately asked the woman and her son to leave. She made a huge scene, yelling about how unfair it was and threatening to leave bad reviews everywhere. But here's what happened next. Remember how she took my picture and threatened to post it on Facebook? Well, she actually did it. She posted the picture with a long rant about how I wouldn't let her innocent child join the party. She painted herself as the victim and made me sound like some kind of monster. The thing is, several of the parents from my son's class saw the post because we're all connected through the school's parent group. They started commenting with the real story, explaining that it was a private party and she had crashed it uninvited. Other parents from the school chimed in too, and it turned out this wasn't the first time she'd pulled something like this. Her post completely backfired. Instead of getting sympathy, she got called out by dozens of parents who were sick of her entitled behavior. She ended up deleting the post, but not before screenshots were taken and shared around. The party continued without any more drama, and my son had an amazing time. When we got home that night, he told me it was the best birthday ever. That made everything worth it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.